Hi, guys. I just want to say that Tom and I really have enjoyed doing these podcasts together. I hope that you've actually enjoyed it and, like myself, have actually learned things. This summer, on August 24th, we are going to do an amazing event right here at Under the Stars at Riverside in Oliver, British Columbia. We are going to do a live podcast. We're interviewing a couple of really interesting guests. We'd like to invite you to be there. I believe that you will not only enjoy it, but will be challenged and encouraged by it. So, August 24th, for more information, go to mscproject.com or to underthestars@riverside.ca. Save the date. Look forward to seeing you there.
By this time, if I start this statement, probably a lot of people are able to finish it. There is nothing as powerful as an idea whose time
Has come.
has come. The idea I would like us to talk about today, Greg, is oh my, if there's something that has changed the world as we know it, and we have been referring to it in passing, and also not in passing, we've been basing a lot of our discussions on it. It is this idea of scripture, Bible.
Yes.
At some point now, for this one, we could almost, with certain amount of certainty, pin it down to say, well, canonization happened at this time.
Yes.
And we have this collection of writings that have taken, been given a status of sacred. This is sacred writings, and they are sacred to Judaism, they are sacred to Christianity, and they are what the religious systems just function on. Bible, the idea of Bible. If I say, Greg, define Bible. What is a Bible?
Well, typically, if you were to say, Greg, go to the bookstore and buy me a Bible, I would bring back something that has a compilation of about 66 books that says typically Holy Bible on the front cover, and we can get it in a number of different translations or versions, etc. on it. So that is a very easy term, using the Bible as a compilation of writings over a course of about, I want to say 1,500 years. I stand to be corrected on that, but it's over a large span of time. But I think the underlying idea behind a Bible is it's about a communication between the divine to the human.
Ooh, okay.
So I would argue that a Bible is something that is as a system, as a method for us to be able to read or recall how God has communicated in history with people.
Okay, so in that communication, so let's paint a picture here. God speaks to an individual, and then that individual takes that message to the target audience. And do they say word for word what God told them?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because many people feel that the writers of the Bible were essentially really good secretaries, and God spoke to them one paragraph at a time, and they wrote it down one word at a time. And ultimately, it was word for word articulated to them. I personally struggle with that. I find all sorts of difficulties with that because if that was a word for word dictation from God, then we should see perfect script all the way through there. If memory serves me correctly, there's some math mistakes there. They've messed up on some mathematics. A few other times they make references to different locations that were in the wrong spot. You see a lot of, there's a lot, but there's a number of human errors in the Bible.
So which part of it is Bible? Which part of it is Bible? Is it the part that God communicated to his servant, or is it the part that the servant communicated to the people, or is it a complex mixture of both?
I'm going to go with complex.
Oh, he's going with complex. There are some questions, Greg, that I feel like, to get deep into this, trying to figure out, because modernity has a system or tendency now of approaching these ancient writings as if they were, printed in the printing press, like.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth a conversation here to try and explore, how can I say this, and we probably don't have the time to do this in depth, but I think to try and trace the journey of how the Bible came to be. Who are some of the players? Who are some of the individuals who are involved in that process, and what did it look like in their time? I feel like we tend to think sometimes that it was always written in A4 paper or whatever size it is, printed neatly, and we don't have an honest conversation on the dynamics of language.
Yeah.
Okay? I think most of what we have as Bible was not written in English.
Yeah.
What happens when you do translations? I remember I once had a professor in college who used to say translation is treason. Because every time you translate, something is lost.
Yep.
And if you factor, let's start there, Greg. Translation. When it's translated, is it still Bible?
I would argue that it is the message that is being delivered. So for me, if I get information that I need to transfer to a group of people, I will get it from the source, either from a document that I've read or a meeting that I've attended, and in turn I come back to my employees, a case in point, and I will try and articulate to them the essence of what our new process or new program is. I will try to explain it to them so they get it in their well, I shouldn't say their language. In my case, I have a number of employees that English is not their mother tongue. So in turn, I am using a lot of English words. I'm repeating a lot of small English words to try to get the concept over, and I'm doing a lot of hand waving and various other things, and we usually get it transferred over. But it is not word for word. But have I transferred the essence of that information that I have received to this other group of people? And arguably, they may not get it perfectly the first time, but with a couple of goes at it, I will get that information moved over. So what part of that is, going back to your question, what part of that is Bible? What I'm trying to say is that this is the message. It is the essence of what has been delivered. And I'm going to go the prophets, in the case that are typically the prophets that are referred to, the ones that have written the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Christian narrative, we call them prophets.
Yep.
And we say the prophet received a message for the people. And in turn, they have probably delivered it verbally the first time. And then they may have had a scribe that worked with them. And they in turn gave that information to the scribe, or maybe the scribe was there while it was being delivered first. And they in turn put it down in a written form. That in turn has been captured and retained and transferred, etc.
You have beautifully traced an interesting progression here that I think we need to just slow it down and talk about. As you're talking, I'm just shaking with excitement here. I'm like, oh my goodness, Greg. You talk about, you said that translators will take something and put it in words that are understandable to the audience that's receiving the message. If I said in English, I am sick and tired, how many ways can that be translated?
You're exhausted, you're ill, all those other, we can use a whole cluster of terms.
There's a whole, that statement can go in so many ways. It could mean that I am actually really sick, as in I have some sort of ailment, and I am tired from that ailment.
Yes.
It could mean I am flabbergasted. Mm-hmm. It could mean that I am neither sick physically nor tired. It could, you could stretch it in so many directions. When a translation is made, is it fair, Greg, to assume that we ultimately lose something, especially when you are translating from a language that we could categorize as a dead language?
I think there's, without question, it is the case that there's things lost. I have, and maybe you're the one that actually said it, but I remember a person that has studied languages, and you've done a lot of study of different languages and dead languages, and don't ask me why you study a language that's already dead. But yeah, what I'm saying is that when you read the scriptures in the Greek and the Hebrew, it's like watching television in color. When you read it in English, it's like watching television in black and white. It's still the same image, but there's lots of nuance and color and reflections that you don't get with black and white. Is it the same? Is it the same movie? Yes. Is it the same message? Sort of, kind of, no.
Let's pin it down to an example, and curious to see how you will respond to this. In a previous episode, we did, when we're talking about these secret societies or societies that have secrets.
Yes.
Mr. Director, make sure you put that link to that conversation for our viewers so that they can go back and watch that. We did say it is not safe to have the hunted or the hunter tell the story of the hunted.
Yes.
In the Greek New Testament, that is the one place that has so much of what Christianity knows about Phariseeism, and all those other religious insiders of the time.
Yes.
And if you ask, I would argue, if you ask a everyday Christian and say, hey, tell me about the Pharisees and the Sadducees, you will get a negative
That's true.
response.
But at the time, they were. You're absolutely right. If you were to ask me that question, I would color it from the fact that they are manipulative religious leaders that are don't always have my best in mind when they deliver stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the Pharisees were very highly trained. They were looked up to. They were appreciated for their role in society and well rewarded financially by and large.
Yeah. They were the smartest of the smart in their communities, you know.
Yeah.
They were pretty well educated. But the challenge is that, one, we have the problem of translation, okay?
Yes.
And we agree that things get lost there. Number two, you have in the original text, if I can call it that, you have the bias of the writer. The writer then says, oh, these Pharisees, you know, in the case of the New Testament, they were this, they were this, they were this. At one time, Jesus called them, you know, brood of vipers, which is a very fancy insult, you know, and they did A, B, C, D, and then that becomes the information we run with about who they were. So if people are using the Bible that way, would you say that's a correct way to use the scriptures as a source for biographical?
No, but I have done that. I will admit that is very easy to do. I think the challenge that we have, and this is a challenge I think all Christians to some degree struggle with. The time, the place, the understanding, the language of that time, the culture of that time. And now we are today with our time, place, culture, and different language. And now the issue is to compress the two. And can we compress it to the point where now we understand what they are struggling with? They'll never understand what we're dealing with, but the issue is to try and compress these two cultures and get the message through all the biases that exist in languages and in our understanding.
Yeah. And this is, I think what we're doing here is we're tracing the journey of what became what we now refer to as Bible.
Yes.
You know, because I do think for many people, and maybe I should phrase this as a question that, maybe I should see how you respond to it. Maybe I'll put you on the spot here. Is the Bible a book?
Does the book contain the Bible? By saying that, for me, I have a problem with the fact that we now have God's message to humanity canonized in so many pages and so many words.
Yeah.
I actually think I have to be very careful as a Christian. I want to think that this is my bias, and I want to run around and tell the world that I have this message book from God, and it's exclusive to me, and God exclusively gave the message to the Bible and the carriers of the Bible. The problem is that as I've got to know God, I see a much larger God. And my strong suspicion is that he has spoken to this group that we talk to, the Judeo-Christian community. But my guess is that he has, and I'm quite sure I'm right, he's also sent messages to other people groups around the planet at different times and places that have spoken to their needs and to them as individuals. He's interested in the saving, and I'm going to use this word, communicating with the whole world, not just through a one particular people group. So if I take that position, then I have to make the assumption that God in his great wisdom and love probably communicated to other people groups in different times and places.
Okay.
Was that a Bible? Yes, for them it was.
For them it was.
For them it was.
Yeah.
And I don't have proof to. Well, I think I can dig up some stuff, but I'm just saying is that off the top of my head, I'm arguing this, saying this is Greg Thorpe's take on it.
Yeah. So you're not only saying, see if I can, I'm going to enjoy this. You're not only saying that there is the Bible. You are saying there are several ways in which God communicates with people.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily through the Bible. Which, by the way, you haven't answered my question. Is it a book?
No, I haven't. I think the Bible is a message contained in a book.
A message contained in a book. At what point did it become a book? Because I think you said at the beginning that there are 66 books.
Yep. And so let me just go back on that.
So I love it when you do that.
The prophets that I referred to,
Yeah.
they wrote these documents that now we have put often chapters and verse numbers, etc., and we have called them the book.
Yeah.
So we have Genesis and Exodus, and these are books. And so for us to analyze and evaluate it, I can quickly say to you, go to the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 20, and follow me as I read this, and you will see the exact wording that I'm seeing, and it is something we can do. But the real thing about the Bible is the message that's coming off the pages. And I think for me, when I read it, I can't only speak for it, is that I can read the Bible and I get an idea or a message today. I come back a week and a half later and I read that and say, you know what, that was really good, but something else strikes me. So I think there is a certain uniqueness about the Scripture, and to me that is the Bible in action. The living component of it. So I haven't answered your question. I get sidetracked on this. So what I'm coming to is
because you love the Bible.
I do. And so you have a number of authors.
Yeah.
Some of them have only written one, what we call a book or portion of it.
Yeah.
Some of them have written many. Paul and various other in the New Testament. We have Moses in the Old Testament. So you have a number of individuals that have authored these books that are all combined that we have canonized many, many years ago, and we call the total grouping the Bible. Now, it's not that much different than the Muslim with the Quran. They have to a large degree canonized, documented in verse and time. So that is not unique to us. Same thing with the holy books that my Sikh friends use, and the Buddhists have their writings, and Confucius has their writings. So you have that part is a modernization process. It's not necessarily sacred, but just a modernization.
Yeah. See, I have a problem here, Greg.
Yeah.
When you say book in the world we live in, when you say book, it in our minds it conjures up something that I think is not true to what we're dealing with here. Because when you say book, I'm thinking of something I can go to the library and I take and I open it, and it is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. I can use it as a reference material. So I can go there and say, I want to find out what this book says about plants that have hairy leaves. I go to there and I read only that. A book can function in so many ways. And there are some of those things that we're not conscious of them, but then that's just how we operate. When I say it's a book, a picture comes into your mind. I think you would agree that some of let me push this argument. A lot of what is in the Bible is not book, but it is maybe a letter. Paul's writings.
Yes.
Paul didn't write books.
He didn't think he was.
He wrote letters.
He wrote letters. Yeah.
Okay. John, the what Christianity calls the book of Revelation, was actually a letter.
Yeah.
Okay. And the way, and I'm being, the scholars out there will persecute me for this maybe. The way you read a book is different from the way you read a letter.
That's a great point. When I receive a personal letter, it doesn't have the same context.
It's very different. It's very different. Take for example let me use again the book of Revelation. You could then start to use it as a reference. You say, okay, what does it say? What does it say? What does it say? But a letter is different. A letter, you have a greeting, you have those after salutations, tell you about what's happening here. There is a letter writing technique, and there is a book writing technique. And you as the reader have to have the frame of mind when you approach. So is the Bible a book? I think the answer is not all of it. Not all of it. Because then what it does is that then it conditions the reader to what they are going to interact with. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're annoyingly right on that one.
Yeah, because even in the books, Greg, even in what we call there are some that we call books, and we're really not quite sure whether they are or not. Was the initial writing in book format or with book idea? And remember, oh boy, here we go. When you and I say book, and probably maybe as some of our listeners here, we think, pages with binding and all of that. They didn't have that, did they?
They didn't. There's one other thing that as you were commenting, it changes, as you say, how we read it. So for example, going back to your idea about hairy plant books. Yeah. You and I could have a textbook and we could argue about hairy plants, and your book could say this, and we could debate it. I could weaponize my argument because my book says this.
Yeah.
our director, his sweetheart, writes him a letter and says, there's a bunch of hairy plants around my backyard.
Yeah.
He's not going to weaponize that.
There's no arguing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what we have done is that we have taken the Bible, and many times, and I'm unfortunately the Christian societies and churches that have weaponized it. But I think your point that you're saying is really a powerful one. Is that you weaponize books, but you don't weaponize love letters or letters.
Yeah. Your approach changes when you know what kind of literature you are approaching.
Yes.
When you are dealing with, say, for example, literature that was written, say, where in the area of the world where I grew up, apartheid South Africa. Okay. When you are reading literature that came out of the civil rights movement, you have a different mindset. It's a different mindset. When you are reading literature that was written by the Jews that were in concentration camps, you approach it with a different mindset. So I think it helps to know what kind of literature you are approaching. Am I reading a letter? Hence why I say maybe to keep on saying the book is probably not doing us much justice.
We're putting ourselves at a disadvantage.
We're putting ourselves at a disadvantage. And another thing, and I don't know what you think about this, is we've spoken about the author's biases.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
The author brings who they are into the communication process. But before we get there, we're dealing with material that was most likely communicated by word of mouth.
Yeah, that's another big problem.
And what happens with stories or things that are communicated by word of mouth is that the details. How can I say this and not get into trouble here? An experiment was done, I'll remember the name. This psychology teacher brought people who had lived through an experience, a traumatic experience. And I think it was World War II, the soldiers who had gone to World War II. And then he says, okay, tell me your experiences. And he just writes down their stories. And then he brings them back a couple of years later and he says, walk me through your experiences again. And then he says, he realized that the narrative starts to change. And so he brings them back again a couple of years later and he says, okay, tell me that experience again. And guess what?
It's changed again.
It's changed again. And psychologists then have come to this conclusion that if there is something that is ridiculously unreliable, it is memory.
Yeah, mine included.
It is so unreliable. I mean, if you ask yourself, because if you give yourself enough time, you might maybe try and figure it out. You ask yourself, by this time last week, what were you wearing?
I know I have my pants on.
You have to crank to find out. And so And so we bring that to the text of the Bible. We agreed here, Greg, that probably God communicates to this one individual. And this individual then tells the people around them. At least that's what the Bible tells us happened. And so you tell them today, you come back tomorrow and you tell them again.
Yep.
And you come back the next week and you tell them again. What are the chances that memory played
Oh, huge
games on
chance.
them?
Huge chance.
I mean, here's a living example. In the New Testament, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yep.
Do they agree on everything?
Nope. And interestingly enough, some mention some events and others don't.
Yeah. And there are cases where they all of them or both or whatever will mention the same event, but not with the same detail.
Yeah.
You know, one will say, "Oh, the cock crowed twice," and the other one says, "Oh, it crowed 3 times." The other one will say, "Oh, there was one demoniac." The other one will say, "Oh, there were actually 2." And
Yeah.
so what happens in that case? Is it still Bible? Is it still?
So the people, and I say the Christian groups that say, you know what, every word in the Bible is true. There's a little tune that says that.
Yes.
And I remember hearing that.
I think it's a nursery rhyme or some kid's song also.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I'm sorry, I don't think I can buy that. What I'm trying to say is that the message is the interesting thing is that as I have studied it, the message that you see in the Old Testament and you go through there, it's told differently.
Yeah.
But the message has a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of similarities. You go to the New Testament, and now you see the same narrative, the same story, but it is actually more things are added to the understanding. And you still get the same message in the last book of the Bible, Revelation. So I am convinced that the unique thing about the Bible, one of the unique things about the Bible is that the message is fairly consistent. How it's said varies. Said well some places.
Yeah.
Said maybe not so well in other places.
Yeah.
But it is still a message that you get between the words and between the lines.
So the message remains. The message is consistent.
Yes.
Even
the words may not be perfect.
Yeah, because I mean it's true with stories and storytellers also that the story can change from one storyteller to the next, from one audience to the next. The change might be in detail. The change might be in the number of days, number of events, number of characters involved. But the message holds.
Mm-hmm.
The message holds. So you find it in different cultures / civilizations where in this culture as one story is told, but it's this set of characters, and you go to another tradition, it's a similar story, different characters, but the message is still the same. And then you go to another one, the characters are different. In this one it's animals, in this one it's people, in this one it's trees or whatever. So I hear that the message remains.
And just to illustrate that, what you just said is that you and I were talking about this a few episodes back, if I recall correctly. I know you and I were talking about this.
Yeah.
Again, my memory. And that is that the story of the flood is told differently in different cultures and different places.
Yeah.
But the message is that there's a lot of water.
Yeah. There was some destruction that happened.
Yeah.
In the Enuma Elish, the epic of Atrahasis and the story of Noah.
Yeah.
You know, all of them are saying there was some destruction and it involved water.
Yeah.
But the characters are different.
Yeah.
The details around, you know, seem different, but the message holds true.
And I think that is a very good example what I'm saying about the rest of the Bible.
Yeah.
There is said by different authors.
Mm-hmm. It takes us to a place, Greg, where we can begin to engage one group of people who were very influential in the movement of the message of what we're referring to as Bible. And I think we need to agitate that statement a bit later. Scribes.
Yes.
Scribes. So these are the individuals who took the time to actually put these words on leather skin or
Papaya.
And they write all this stuff down and then that way when it's written it's there. Yeah, it's written, it becomes somewhat frozen until time passes and the next generation of scribes are trying to copy that and contextualize it to their audience.
And I want to stop you and back up because we're talking about scribes putting down phonetical words, whatever language it is. And the interesting thing that my understanding is that the Israelite nation, and particularly when they left Egypt and went across the desert, is where my understanding and my reading is when this phonetical writing skills was developed. Prior to that, you had the hieroglyphics that were popular in Egypt. There's some advantages to hieroglyphics. So once you understand a few symbols, you can, I haven't done this, but I'm told this, you can basically figure out the whole thing and interpret it into your own head. And everybody can look at that quite quickly and get it figured out.
Yeah.
And they can translate these graphics into their own language.
Yeah. Because language is primarily in the
the cranium.
But I will first put out a disclaimer and say it is a bit more complex and difficult than how you have.
I did my best to simplify this.
Even then, miscommunication happens.
Sure, and I that I will admit.
Yeah.
But it just talks about how we have used as humans have used graphics. Now we go to the phonetical system, and now with that there is a higher degree of precision. But as you're alluding to here a minute ago, is that you got scribes photocopying to the next group.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that the copy rooms were composed of somebody reading fairly slowly and a dozen guys writing down what they heard.
Yeah. See, let me try and then illustrate it in English, even though we know they were not, but for the purpose of the illustration, I will use English. And let's imagine I am the scribe who is reading the ancient document that we need to put into everyday language for the day we live in. And you are the scribe who is writing down.
We're in trouble.
Okay? And we get to a phrase where I read, say, the following. Let me make something up right now and see how you would write it down. Okay? And the phrase will say something along the lines of, And the grass was greener on the other side.
I would write it down. One farmer used more fertilizer than the other.
Because then at that point, you have to choose then. Do I write the words? Or do I write
The message.
the message? And it gets even more complex. Think about the English words. Let's see if I can pull up one. Say I'm reading, I'm the scribe that's reading here. And the statement I read is, and it all happened, and they said, right. Okay. Which right are you going to write in your document? Is it the right of
W, yeah.
the right,
Yep.
or the right of writing, as in putting? Which one are you going to use? They both sound the same.
Yep.
But if you don't have the,
The context.
then you don't know.
Yeah.
So scribes, there's so much evidence of this happening, Greg, where scribes were just writing, and now these guys who enjoy these languages then sit down and they say, oh, we think the scribe made a mistake here, because we're comparing this text and this text. We think this was a mistake. And it's not only words that sound the same, it's also words that look the same. And dare I even say, it is words that have remained unchanged, as in how they are written, but their meaning has changed.
Just to add another layer of complexity, my understanding is in the New Testament, the language of the day was Aramaic.
To some extent, yes.
Yeah.
The language that
It was spoken in the marketplace.
yeah, the language of everyday business, depending largely on where you were, was Greek. But not the kind of Greek that the guys in the scholars were using. No, it was if I can use English terms, I would say it was more like slang.
Okay.
Not your everyday, it's your everyday person's Greek, but it's not the one that is beautiful it's not the kind of Greek that you would use for writing something as important as this letter that we now call Bible. They used the Greek of the everyday person, not so refined, not so... Because I guess, I think it's because that was their audience.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
They were not writing for the educated masses. They were writing for the everyday person. Okay. And the other challenge on top of that is that there is evidence. Take, for example, the book of Revelation again.
Yes.
You can tell, let me use a different illustration. If you asked me to write you a letter in French, and you are a fluent speaker and reader of French, when you take the letter I have written, you will be able to say, my goodness, this guy, his French really needs help. The Greek that you find in the book of Revelation, you take it and you read it, you'll be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this guy didn't know any Greek.
Yeah.
That's the other challenge that you have. So you have the communication process, which is not perfect. Not that even if had they tried to be perfect, I think I would argue the very nature of who we are as humans still makes it not so perfect.
Let me just add one more thing about that. You mentioned the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
John, who was writing the letter, is given a vision of things in the future.
Ooh, yes.
So now he's trying to take things that he has never seen before and wrap it around language of the day. So let me illustrate it this way.
Yeah.
Let's suppose that you were living 150 years ago, or not even 100 years ago. Let's go 150 years ago. And you had a vision and you see people running around with cell phones.
Oh my goodness.
And you have images on it.
Yeah.
And now you try to say, well, okay, I saw this thing, and there was a brick that had pictures on it,
Yeah.
and they talked to it, and they tapped on it, and they could talk to people anywhere in the world. And it's like,
Yeah, people think you're crazy.
say, oh, come on, what is the guy doing?
He's so detached from reality.
Yeah. And so here we find John in the same thing, trying to describe the throne room and all, and he's using things that when we look at it today, say, what is going on with this author?
Mm-hmm.
So you have that complexity
Yeah.
in parts of not in all parts of the Bible, but in portions of it.
In portions of it, yeah. And now let me add another complexity to that now.
Yeah.
You have also, with the scribes, all writing these materials into their languages and to their audiences. You have now things moving from one language to the next. Mm-hmm. And hence, today there's an entire field of study that is able to take, for example, let's say the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes.
Okay. And they take the Masoretic text, which is, what we have and as Bible. And then they take the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament, Bible.
Yes. To talk to us about that.
And then they go through that and they say, oh, I look at this and I look at this and I look at that and, oh my, they are different. But they're all the book of Genesis.
So
But
which
they're different.
which one is right?
I would even ask that question this way, Greg. I'll say, which one is Bible?
So you have spent a lot of time studying languages. I have not. I'm still struggling with the first one. So what do you make of this argument? And we see this popularized argument.
Yeah.
Well, one is better than the other, and one is not accurate, and etc.
Yeah. And before I even go into that, this is, I want to show that this is actually something that everyday people can see for themselves. Like you go to the New Testament and you see the words of Jesus or any one of the people there who will say, it is written, referring to what we refer to now as the Old Testament.
Yes.
So it is written that Jesus said, man shall not live by bread alone.
Okay.
And then you go to the Old Testament and it doesn't read the same way.
Whoops.
There are so many places like that. And what it shows us is that the Bible, in open quotes for those who are, listening and not watching on YouTube, can't see me making the quotation sign here. What we refer to as Bible has a long history of transmission, and it is highly likely what Jesus and all the people in the New Testament were citing as Bible is different in some ways with what we have today as Bible. Take Josephus, Christians love him, Jews are very skeptical of him. Mm-hmm. Josephus, in his, writings, he has a place where he discusses things that are in the Old Testament, like the genealogy, for example. Mm. And some places he uses different numbers. And he says, well, it's written that so-and-so was this many years old when he had this. but it's different from what we have now. I think what's happening there is something that should not shock people. I think it's something that's natural. I think our problem, Greg, I think the problem is that the idea of Bible, there I go again, making that, the idea of Bible, we have seen, like we were discussing in an earlier time, as something that is frozen in time. Something that is like a relic in a museum, something that is behind a glass and it's frozen and it has never changed. When actually the history of this document says it has adapted to people every time, and still, I think this is the beauty of the book, and still remained relevant.
Yeah, you're pointing us down a really interesting pathway that, yes, the Bible is living, and we have, we should understand it, that this is a live document, and new understandings will come out of it, possibly.
Yeah. I mean, you say it that you read it one time and you're like, oh my goodness, that is just absolutely amazing. You come back next week and you read the same thing and you're like, how come I've never seen that before?
Yeah. So the Bible has a unique quality and characteristic about it. Is that similar to other holy books, or is that unique to the Bible?
I do think that the principles we spoke about in the previous conversation about the Illuminati and Freemasons come into play here.
They had something to do with that?
No, I actually think that I have to be very cautious in how I present the religion of others.
Yes. I
Okay.
agree. Yeah.
As much exposure as I have on Islam and all of this, I am someone who is who approaches faith with a very open heart and open mind. And I have to be very cautious in how I do it. And therefore, having said that, I will say that the people who hold those religious books as sacred believe that.
Yes.
Because Muhammad was an inspired prophet, peace be upon him. And when he started to write down the Quran, he is doing exactly what the other prophets are doing, is receiving a message and contextualizing it. And over time in the history of Islam, over time, the scholars who come up and all these guys pretty much do the same thing. They contextualize. And if you have spent time with the history of Christianity, you know that when contextualization came into the picture in full force, a lot of theological debates started to happen. Because then you say, oh no, what does it mean here? This is what it means here, this is what it means here. It has happened in Christianity, it has happened in Judaism, it has happened in Islam. So you start to have theological debates. And when theological debates come into the picture, then there is a splitting. Okay, so in Christianity you have denominationalization.
Yes.
These guys saying, no, when we believe this, or we break off, we become this, and they all just break off. The same thing happened in Islam. They all started to, and then they have this group and this group and this group and this group, all still interpreting the same scripture. And it happened in Judaism also. And you have this group and this group and this group and this group. So ultimately, I would say above the conversation of are their books sacred? There is the realization I think we should all make, at least I think so, that says, wait, there is a human natural tendency that we've all followed. What does this say about us? And then we then move. We're not moving away from the book, but we're using the book to understand our own humanity. And not to say, oh, this book is better than this book and this book's better. I mean, we all have our own biases.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I can argue for one book over the other. Okay. And I feel like I can make a very valid argument. But at the same time, I have to respect that the arguments of the other for a different book are also valid because they are important to that person.
I appreciate what you said.
Yeah.
And then what happens is some guru, some person from some denomination says, you know what? We have a disparity with our understanding. We have a discrepancy on these points. And then I got to be very careful what I'm saying here. But maybe they had too much pizza the night before and they have divine understanding that comes to them. And they stand up and says, last night I got understanding directly from God and this is how it is.
Yeah.
So my question is that we have, as we talked about, we have different holy books that we got here. Now we have modern day people running around and most people can see them on Sunday morning. They'll get up and say, God spoke to me and this is what it is. And we have this, what I'm coming to, a progressive understanding of Scripture, just like you're pointing at to. So this was good back then, but now God has showed me this is how it is now. So trust me.
That's a difficult one because how do you deal with those things? How do you address those things in a healthy way? Because we have real world, examples of how it has had a huge cost to human life.
There's this Jim Jones guy that had a following of people that he had divine understanding given to him, and it didn't work out very well for those people.
Yeah.
They drank a lot of bad lemonade.
Yeah. And a couple of years after the life of Jesus, if I remember well, when was this? Mr. Director, you should probably be able to find this online. There was a documentary that was done. Was it the BBC? I might be wrong. That was called The Rivals of Jesus. The Rivals of Jesus documentary. And it was just such a beautiful portrayal of how there were other leaders who came up afterwards and said, oh, I am the leader. I am the one. There was one guy who was making people cut off their fingers.
Oh my.
There was, these things happen in the name of religion. And
so what I'm really saying is that can we use this scripture as problematic as it is, understanding it is not word perfect, and somehow utilize that to give us a safety net going forward?
I think so. I really do.
I don't want to go drinking bad lemonade is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think and I stand to be corrected. I have interacted with a fair amount of these quote unquote sacred books from the big or popular sacred religious traditions. And I'll keep coming back to this. If there's one thing that they all have in common, if there's one thing that they all seem to emphasize, it is the value of human life. You will find it consistently everywhere. That value is packaged, with the bias of the author, the scribes who changed things here and there just because they wanted to contextualize, and another group of people we didn't talk about, the redactors. People who say, no, I don't think you actually got it correct, and then they change a few things and say this isn't this so that it makes sense. You have all of that, and yet that message that says, let me say it that way, human life is sacred. That message that says people are important. That message that says things like suffering need to be looked at because they affect people. People are at the center of it. They are not on the sidelines. They're at the center of it. If you want to get enlightenment, guess what? Who's getting enlightenment? A human being. It's people at the center each and every time. And I would then say, if it's not valuing people, stop long enough to reevaluate what you are believing. Because it has to value people.
Yeah.
It has to value human life. And we do get caught up, I think, in, this was written wrong. Or this was that.
So and I thank you for pointing us in that direction, and that's really an interesting point you make, that all of these, that you and again, I think you've spent more time reading a number of these other holy books than I've had a chance to expose myself to a number of them, but not as maybe as you have. But what I'm coming to is that I appreciate what you said, is that all of these primary documents that are fundamental to many of the world's biggest religions have put human life as a very high value.
Yeah.
And suffering should be mitigated.
Yeah.
And I believe that is a powerful point. One of the things that I personally, this is for me, is that when I read the Bible that we're talking about, I come away with a very distinct understanding and appreciation for God. And for me, this is a passion for me. How do we, as a society, how do individuals in different times and places understand God? And oftentimes there's some very brutal understandings of divinity.
Yeah.
But what I read in this, the Christian Bible, we have an image that comes off those pages that is about a God that is, in simple terms, crazy about people.
Yeah.
And that truly is intriguing to me. I am fascinated about a God that would go to the depths and lengths for me. And so I'm okay with not having every question answered, because I know that there's a God that has my best interest. He has my back.
Yeah.
And so for me, this is a very powerful message that I appreciate about the Bible. And it is one that I think is particularly pronounced in the Christian holy book, Scripture. Other material that I have read, I don't get the same intensity of love for me, and again, this is just me.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm particularly
Yeah.
fascinated, intrigued, amazed, and I'm in awe of the picture of God that comes off the pages.
Yeah. So here comes our alien here.
Oh.
All the way from Jupiter.
We gotta keep him off the earth.
At some point, Greg, we received the idea of Bible. The Western civilization is more so, that's the book that has arguably shaped Western civilization, the Bible. A lot of atrocities, the alien will say, well, I've seen that a lot of atrocities have been done, and I've also seen that a lot of good has been done. This big idea called Bible, give your verdict on it. Go for it.
I'm Mr. Alien. I think the Bible, when it was articulated and compiled as in a letter form, had profound positive impact on the people that heard it and read it. As civilization has cataloged it, they have weaponized it to justify a lot of atrocities, and we could talk about that for a long time. But the message is still there, and the message is greater than it has the big idea of a God. In my terms,
I love that. Yeah.
That the big idea about a God that is crazy and is in love with me, and I am fascinated, even though I think there's some wonderful qualities about me.
Yeah.
The reality is that I know who I am, and to think that there's a God that's interested in me, that wants me as a friend, is very inspiring. So the big idea, it is super good, and it also has the capacity to be super bad.
Wow. I would say to the alien that the big idea of Bible has been lost in the bankruptcy of language. In that we have synonymized words that have not helped what Bible is, but have kind of like covered, put a veil over it. For example, I would talk about words like Bible, scripture, word of God. Most people hear all those as the same thing. They're all synonyms at some level, at some point. So in the poverty of language, we have diminished, or at least we have downplayed the power of what is in these writings. When we have the better language to describe and maybe also identify what we have here, it ought to be a phrase that appreciates the time expanse between the first author and the last author. and all the other authors that didn't make it into the canon. It will be a language that's going to capture how people separated by thousands of years looked at one thing and came to a similar conclusion. It will capture how human life has been changed by an idea that there is a God and He's on your side. It will capture all these things. And unfortunately, Mr. Alien, we as earth dwellers do not have a language that is beautiful enough or powerful enough to capture all of this, and all we're left with is Bible. But there is more to it. And I wish more people would delve in and see all these, let me use the words of one musician who said, it is the beauty in the incompleteness and the completeness that exists in the incompleteness. It just sounds so
convoluted.
Yeah,
but it is right.
But it is right. Where it is lacking, it is actually not lacking. And where you think the flame is being extinguished, it's actually burning the more brighter. And whatever that people have thrown at this collection of writings, okay? Because remember, even the ones that didn't make it into the collection are also right beside the collection, and they're all just saying, hey,
point in the same direction.
Yeah, something special is happening to humanity here. And I think I would say the Bible tells the story of humanity in a way that other books don't, in a way that other letters don't. And it's worth your time. It's worth your time. And if it helps, just study it for yourself. Just read it for yourself. And Greg, I think I would even say that to the alien about the Quran and about all these other religious books. Take time. Read. Get to know what it's all about.
We might even give the alien a copy.
We might even give the alien a copy.
Yeah.
To our audience, again, I guess we're inviting you to, just reach out. I'm curious. I think, Greg, you're curious also. We want to know if the alien came to you and said, hey, this idea of Bible.
Yeah.
What would be your response, Write on the comments, write us an email,
subscribe,
letter, and subscribe.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
We would get the alien to subscribe too.
We should get the alien to subscribe too, and we've had a number of them show up from different parts. They should subscribe too.
Excellent.
We'll beat them into that.
It's been a good discussion. Thank you, Joe.